America loves Black legends until the legend is also queer. Then the spotlight does a trick. It steals the art, scrubs the identity, and sells you a clean version of history. Tonight, we're bringing back 10 names they tried to erase twice, by race and by sexuality. Some were edited, some were buried, some were turned into rumors. Watch closely and tell me, who gets remembered and who gets deleted? 1. Marsha P. Johnson. The saint they kept trying to turn into a footnote. Marsha didn't come out. She survived out loud in a country that treated Black, queer, gender non-conforming joy like a crime scene. Here's the first erasure. America loves a revolution, as long as it has a clean hero. Stonewall gets packaged into a neat, patriotic origin story, rainbows, slogans, sanitized pride parades. But the people who actually lived the danger? The girls sleeping on benches, the kids running from cops, the Black and brown trans women whose bodies were treated like disposable evidence? History tries to blur them into the background like static. Then comes the second erasure. Even inside the gay rights story, respectability became a weapon. Marsha was too poor, too femme, too chaotic, too honest. She didn't fit the postcard version of liberation. So they reduced her to a rumor, a side character, a legend, anything that didn't require accountability. And yet, Marsha kept building. Not just protest, but infrastructure. Food, shelter, family. STAR wasn't a slogan, it was a lifeline for street kids who had nowhere else to go. Imagine being told your existence is inappropriate and still spending your nights trying to keep other people alive. Now the tragedy that still splits people in the comments, Marsha's death. Found in the Hudson River, quickly labeled suicide. Closed like a file nobody wanted to read. Later, pushed back into public conversation because communities don't forget what institutions prefer to bury. Whether you believe the system was careless, biased, or something darker, the pain is the same. A life that carried everyone ended in a sentence that felt too easy. So here's the question that stings. Why do our icons only become important after they're safely gone? And why do we keep letting history pick which queers are presentable enough to remember? If Marsha's story hit you, argue with me in the comments. Was she erased by hate or by comfort? And if you want more stories the Spotlight tried to delete, subscribe to silentfame, because we're not letting them rewrite the ending. 2. Little Richard, the rock god who wasn't allowed to be a whole person. They call him a pioneer like it's a compliment. But sometimes pioneer is just a pretty word for, we took everything from you and asked you to smile about it. Little Richard didn't just influence rock and roll, he detonated it. The scream, the swagger, the glittering chaos that made America's teenage hearts malfunction. And that's exactly why the machine got nervous. Because when a Black man shows up that loud, makeup, hair, hips, heat, he's not just entertaining. He's threatening a whole social order built on who gets to be seen and who has to behave. First erasure, appropriation. The sound spreads, the style goes mainstream, and suddenly the face of rock becomes safer, paler, easier to sell. In living rooms that didn't want to admit they were dancing to Black queer electricity. Second erasure, sanitization. Richard's life gets edited into a wild youth followed by a clean redemption. A tidy moral arc that makes straight America comfortable. He sinned, he repented, end of story. But real people aren't sermons. Real people don't resolve into one quote, one era, one label. Here's the silentfame part they don't like to linger on. The war inside him. Fame telling him, be the spectacle. Religion telling him, be ashamed. A nation applauding his fire while punishing the truth that fueled it. How do you live when your gift is celebrated but your nature is treated like a scandal? And then the cruelest twist. Every time he tried to claim control of his own story, the world treated it like entertainment. Another headline, another meme, another crazy Richard moment. Even his pain got turned into content. So tell me, was Little Richard erased by the industry or by the audience that only wanted him in costume? Because we love icons, don't we? Until they ask to be human. Drop your take in the comments. Respectful, but real. And if you want the uncensored history, where genius doesn't get edited into something palatable, subscribe to Silent Fame. We're not here to worship legends. We're here to tell the truth they survived. 3. Tracy Chapman, the star who refused to perform her private life. Tracy Chapman is the kind of artist America pretends it wants. Serious, honest, timeless, and that's exactly why the spotlight tried to punish her for one unforgivable crime: privacy. Here's the double erasure in slow motion. First erasure, she's black. In a business that sells black music like a product, but treats black women like a problem to manage. She arrives with a voice that doesn't flirt, doesn't beg, doesn't dress itself up for the camera. Just stories, poverty, escape, the ache of trying to outrun your own zip code. Fast Car wasn't a hit. It was a confession millions of Americans recognize as their own. Second erasure, she's queer, and the industry understands queer identity as marketing, unless you refuse to let it be. Tracy didn't make her love life a campaign. She didn't feed the tabloids. She didn't turn intimacy into proof. And people hate that because silence makes them feel entitled to invent. So the whispers started, the insinuations, the demand that she clarify, confirm, deny, like her humanity was a public service announcement. And the more she stayed quiet, the more the culture treated her quiet as suspicious. That's the trap. Talk and you get dissected. Don't talk and you get accused. Then comes the modern twist, the resurgence. When Fast Car returned to the center of American culture, it wasn't just nostalgia. It was a reminder that her writing never left. But notice what happens every time she reappears. People rush past the music and sprint straight toward her private life again. Like the song isn't enough. Like she owes the world a label before she's allowed to be honored. So let's argue. Is Tracy Chapman an icon because she stayed mysterious? Or was the mystery forced on her by a world that punishes Black queer women for existing without permission? Comment your take. Do we deserve to know everything about artists we love? And if you want more stories where the silence is the evidence, subscribe to Silent Fame. Because some legends weren't erased by disappearing. They were erased because they refused to perform. 4. Sister Rosetta Tharpe. The woman who invented rock, then got buried under it. If rock and roll has a mother, America treated her like an illegitimate child. Rosetta didn't ease into history. She kicked the door down with a guitar that sounded like thunder in church clothes. Gospel stages, radio waves, packed crowds. A Black woman in the early to mid 1900s playing so loud and so fearless that the future had no choice but to copy her. And that's the first erasure, appropriation. The riffs show up later in the hands of men who get called founding fathers. The swagger becomes new. The distortion becomes genius. And Rosetta, who was doing it first, gets filed away as a niche gospel act, like her electricity didn't create the entire outlet. Then comes the second erasure, queer silence. Because the church road had rules. You could sing about sin, but you couldn't be the kind of person they labeled as sin. Rosetta's life was surrounded by whispers about love, about intimacy, about a closeness with women that audiences noticed and the industry did not want to name. Whether you call it rumor, coded history, or an open secret, the mechanism is the same. Keep her acceptable, keep her marketable, keep her story clean enough to sell. There's a detail that feels like a movie scene. The staged spectacle of respectability, public romance, public display, while the private truth stayed locked behind the curtain. Imagine living in a world where your talent is celebrated as God-given, and your heart is treated like a threat to God's reputation. And here's the gut punch. Rosetta didn't die as a household name. The culture took her sound, cashed it, then walked away like they'd never met her. That's the tragedy that makes people cry, not that she wasn't great, but that greatness didn't protect her from being minimized. So tell me in the comments, if Rosetta was the blueprint, why do we still hand the crown to the copycats? And if you want more stories where history forgets on purpose, subscribe to Silent Fame. We're not letting the originators die twice. 5. Willie Ninja, the godfather of Vogue who watched the world. Steal his reflection. Willie Ninja taught the world how to move, and then the world pretended it invented the mirror. Before voguing became a music video punchline, it was survival choreography. A language built by Black and brown queer kids who didn't get to be safe, didn't get to be soft, didn't get to be seen, unless they made being seen an art form. Ballroom wasn't just performance, it was a courtroom where the rejected put life on trial and won. And Willie? He wasn't just a dancer, he was elegance weaponized. Precision, control, the kind of beauty that looks expensive because it costs you everything. First erasure, mainstream extraction. The aesthetics get lifted, polished, sold. Runways borrow it. Pop culture devours it. People scream, "Yas!" in suburbs that would have crossed the street if they saw the original kids walking home at night. The world loved the style, but not the people who invented it. Second erasure, the AIDS shadow and the disposable era. So many ballroom legends were living with a timer nobody talked about. Funerals, silence, empty spaces at the function. And the cruelty of it is this: the culture kept partying with the moves while the community that created them was losing bodies, housing, healthcare, losing tomorrow. Willie did break through, modeling, teaching, turning underground genius into visible art. But even then, you can feel the tragedy. Visibility doesn't equal protection. Fame doesn't equal safety. Sometimes fame is just a spotlight you're standing in while people count how quickly they can replace you. This story always sparks arguments, so let's go there. When pop culture borrows from the margins, is it influence? Or is it theft with better lighting? Comment your take. Fight for it. And if you want more erased legends dragged back into the frame, subscribe to Silent Fame, because we remember the names the world tried to dance past. 6. James Baldwin, the prophet they only quoted when he stayed convenient. America loves James Baldwin the way it loves a fire alarm, as long as it's not too loud and as long as it doesn't name the real smoke. Baldwin was a national conscience, sharp, brilliant, impossible to ignore. He could stand on television, calm as a surgeon, and slice through the country's lies about race with one sentence. Schools teach him, politicians cite him, people post his quotes like they're self-care. And that's the first erasure, sanitization. They turned Baldwin into a race writer, a safe category, useful, contained, digestible. But Baldwin was never just talking about race. He was talking about desire, loneliness, power, the way America polices bodies, the way it makes certain love stories unspeakable. Then comes the second erasure, queer punishment. Because Baldwin wasn't a respectable symbol, He was a black man who refused to perform masculinity the way movements wanted. And that made him a target, not only for white America, but sometimes for the very circles that claim liberation while demanding he fit their image of it. Imagine being essential to the conversation and still being treated like an embarrassment at the table. Here's the tragedy that hits like a bruise. Baldwin spent his life telling the truth, and people kept trying to edit the truth into something flattering. They praised his courage while rejecting the parts of him that explained where that courage came from. They wanted the prophet, not the person. They wanted the warning, not the wound. And when a man is only welcomed in pieces, he starts living in pieces. That's a quiet kind of heartbreak, being world famous and still fundamentally unhomeable. So I want to hear you in the comments. Was Baldwin erased more by open hatred or by selective love? 7. Bayard Rustin, the mastermind. They hid like a dirty secret. If the civil rights movement was a symphony, Bayard Rustin was the conductor they forced to stand behind the curtain. Most Americans can picture the March on Washington, but marches don't appear by magic. They're built by logistics, strategy, discipline. And Rustin was the man who could turn chaos into choreography. The mystery is, how does someone that essential become someone most people can't name? Because Rustin wasn't only black in a racist country, he was openly gay when that fact could be used like a weapon to fracture the entire movement. His enemies didn't need to beat his ideas. They attacked his body, his past, his arrest record, his relationships. A smear didn't have to be true. It only had to be loud enough to scare respectable leaders into stepping away. And it worked. Rustin was pushed into the background for the good of the cause, like his dignity was an acceptable sacrifice. Imagine giving your life to freedom and still being told, quietly, not like that. Not your love, not your softness, not your truth. That's the tragedy that hits hardest. Rustin knew the price and kept paying it anyway. He trained leaders in nonviolence, then watched them get praised while he got managed. He built stages for other men to become legends while he was treated like an inconvenient rumor standing too close to the spotlight. Here's the comment war question. Did the movement betray him? Or did it do what it had to do to survive? Because respectability politics is brutal. When the world is hunting you, you start trimming pieces of yourself to look safe. And too often, the first pieces trimmed are the queer ones. But Rustin's story still inspires for one reason: courage without applause. He proves you can be erased and still be powerful, hidden and still historic. So tell me below, would you have kept working if even your own side asked you to disappear? And if you want more names, history tried to delete 8. Gladys Bentley, the tuxedo queen who was forced to confess on paper. Gladys Bentley is the kind of story that feels too dramatic to be real. Until you remember, America has always demanded this exact cruelty. Harlem, roaring and bright, jazz leaking out of doorways. And on stage, Gladys, big, bold, in a white tuxedo and top hat, singing raunchy parodies, flirting with women like the world belonged to her. That was the first miracle. A black, masculine-presenting queer woman being openly herself before visibility even had a name. Then the country changed its mind. Crackdowns, moral panic, the lavender fear tightening around nightlife. Gladys didn't just lose gigs, she lost permission to exist. And here's where the silent fame mystery lives. How do you survive when your identity becomes a target again? In the 1950s, she published a piece claiming she was a woman again, describing a cure, a return to normal. On paper, it reads like confession. In your gut, it feels like a hostage note, because sometimes the closet isn't a choice. It's a shelter you crawl into because the storm is trying to kill you. That's erasure at its cruelest. They don't just silence you, they make your own mouth do the silencing. The world used her as a warning. See? Even she admitted it was wrong. But her legacy didn't die. It went underground into drag king swagger, into queer performance, into every person who learned to weaponize style as survival. Gladys didn't disappear. She got buried. So let's fight it out in the comments. Was Gladys a tragedy or a strategist? If you had to choose between truth and safety, what would you do? 9. Lorraine Hansberry, the Broadway legend, edited into a safe version. Lorraine Hansberry wrote A Raisin in the Sun and cracked Broadway open. For many Americans, especially older generations, her name sits in the untouchable category. Civil rights hero, cultural treasure, respectable genius. And that's exactly how erasure works. Because Lorraine wasn't forgotten, she was edited. History loves Black icons in a glass case. Noble, heterosexual, family-friendly, easy to teach without anyone panicking. Lorraine died at 34, so the world got to freeze her as a clean symbol. Her work survived, her full self didn't. The whispers were always there. Private letters, coded longing, her connection to queer circles, the way she had to speak in initials and shadows to keep her public life intact. Imagine writing about freedom while knowing your own love could get you turned into a scandal overnight. Imagine being praised as the voice of your people, while fearing the microphone would be taken the moment the truth got too clear. And then comes the second layer. Her legacy was curated after she died. Sometimes in the name of protection, but protection can become a prison. It can turn a complicated woman into a safe poster and call that respect. So here's the question I want you fighting about in the comments. When we say we honor our icons, are we honoring them or the version that doesn't challenge us? Would Lorraine's play have become a classic if America had to accept Lorraine as openly queer too? And one more. Is it ever okay to hide someone's queerness to protect the movement? Or is that just another kind of violence dressed up as strategy? Drop your take below. No polite answers. And if you want more stories where the spotlight didn't just dim, it rewrote the script. Subscribe to Silent Fame. 10. Pauli Murray, the icon history, didn't know where to file. Pauli Murray should be a household name. Civil rights lawyer, poet, priest, an architect of equality whose ideas helped reshape America's legal thinking. And yet, for decades, Pauli was treated like a misfiled document. Important, but inconvenient. This is double erasure at its coldest. Not scandal, not destruction, misclassification. Too radical for some civil rights spaces, too black for white feminist spaces, too queer, too gender nonconforming, too uncontainable for institutions that only know how to honor people who fit a simple box. Here's the tragedy. When you don't fit the categories, history doesn't know where to put you. So it puts you nowhere. Pauli named Jane Crow, exposing how racism and sexism locked together. But they also carried private pain. Letters and journals that show a lifelong fight to be seen accurately, to live in a body and a world that kept insisting on the wrong frame. Imagine building language for other people's dignity while the world refuses to use the right language for yours? Now the reclamation looks triumphant. Pauli on a US quarter, institutions finally saying the name. But here's the uncomfortable ending. Is recognition still justice when it arrives after the suffering is over? Or is it the system washing its hands, honoring the dead because they can't ask for anything back? So I'm leaving you with one open wound. Do we simplify icons to make them usable, or accept that liberation is messy and still worth it? If Pauli's story made you feel seen or angry, say it in the comments. So here's what I can't stop thinking about. Were these icons erased by hate or by comfort and respectability? And when institutions finally honor them, quarters, tributes, documentaries, is that justice or just guilt management? Drop your hardest take in the comments. Which story hurt the most, and which one should be taught in every school? If you want more history that refuses to be sanitized, subscribe to Silent Fame.